Most people underestimate what one focused hour can actually do because they measure change by visible results instead of internal shifts. But every lasting transformation begins invisibly. Before habits change, the self-image changes. Before actions improve, the mind must be given new instructions. 1 hour a day is not about productivity in the traditional sense. It is about mental conditioning. It is the deliberate act of stepping out of autopilot and choosing to influence the direction of your inner world. The mind is always being programmed, either by intention or by default. And default programming almost always comes from fear, repetition of past failures, and emotional reactions that were never questioned. When a person sets aside 1 hour with purpose, they interrupt the unconscious patterns that have been running their life. Most negative feelings are recycled emotions, not new ones. They are habits of thought reinforced over years. Worry becomes familiar. Self-doubt becomes comfortable. Stress feels normal. That 1 hour creates a break in the loop. It is a controlled environment where the mind is exposed to new ideas, higher concepts, and empowering images that slowly begin to overwrite the old mental software. The subconscious mind does not argue. It accepts repetition. Whatever is impressed upon it consistently becomes accepted as truth. During this hour, the mind starts learning a new rhythm. Instead of reacting, it observes. Instead of assuming the worst, it considers possibility. Instead of replaying pain, it rehearses growth. This is how reprogramming happens. Not through force, but through exposure. Just like a seed planted in the soil does not sprout immediately, mental reprogramming requires patience. Yet every session adds another layer, another thought, another image, another emotional reference point. Over time, the mind stops defaulting to negativity because it has been introduced to something stronger. Negative feelings often come from a misalignment between who a person believes they are and who they are capable of becoming. That tension creates frustration, anxiety, and emotional resistance. 1 hour a day allows a person to bridge that gap consciously. In that space, they begin to redefine themselves. They stop identifying with past mistakes and start identifying with future potential. Identity is the most powerful force in human behavior. People do not act according to what they want. They act according to who they believe they are. Change the identity and behavior follows naturally. This hour also retrains focus. Most people's attention is scattered across problems, comparisons, and distractions. Focus determines emotional state. When attention is constantly placed on what's missing or what went wrong, negative feelings intensify. But when focus is intentionally directed toward growth, learning, and self-mastery, the emotional climate shifts. Calm replaces chaos. Clarity replaces confusion. Confidence slowly replaces fear. Not because life becomes easier, but because the mind becomes stronger. Reprogramming the mind is not about denying reality. It is about choosing the dominant interpretation of reality. The mind can only hold one dominant image at a time. If it is filled with fear-based images, the body responds with tension and stress. If it is filled with images of progress, purpose, and capability, the body responds with energy and motivation. That 1 hour becomes a rehearsal for the person you are becoming. And the mind does not distinguish between practice and performance. What is rehearsed internally eventually expresses itself externally. Consistency is what turns this hour into a transformation tool. A single session inspires, but repeated sessions rewire. Each day, the neural pathways associated with confidence, focus, and self-control are strengthened. Each day, the old emotional patterns lose a little more authority. Over time, the mind begins to expect progress instead of disappointment. That expectation alone changes how challenges are perceived. Problems stop feeling personal and start feeling temporary. This is why 1 hour a day is powerful. It is not about escaping life. It is about preparing for it. It is the space where the conscious mind takes leadership over the subconscious. It is where intention replaces reaction. Discipline replaces emotional chaos. Direction replaces confusion. And slowly, almost quietly, the person begins to feel different before they ever see different results. More grounded in uncertainty, more composed under pressure, more aware of their thoughts instead of controlled by them, more intentional about what they allow into their mind, more selective with the ideas they accept as truth, more confident in their ability to shape their future from the inside out. Most people believe negative feelings are something to eliminate, suppress, or escape from, but that misunderstanding gives those emotions even more control. Negative feelings are not enemies. They are indicators. They are signals from the mind and body pointing toward misalignment, unresolved thoughts, or internal resistance. When a person labels emotions as bad or wrong, they stop listening and start reacting. Reaction creates chaos. Awareness creates power. The moment someone learns to observe a negative feeling without identifying with it, the emotional grip begins to loosen. Every emotion has a cause, and that cause is always a thought. Feelings do not appear randomly, they follow interpretation. Two people can face the same circumstance, yet feel completely different emotions. The difference is not the event, but the meaning assigned to it. When someone feels fear, anger, sadness, or frustration, it is not proof that life is against them. It is evidence that a belief is being challenged. Negative feelings arise when old mental conditioning conflicts with a new level of awareness or desire. They show up when the mind is being stretched beyond what it is familiar with. Instead of resisting negative feelings, the key is to decode them. Fear often signals growth. Discomfort often signals change. Frustration often signals unused potential. When these emotions are misunderstood, people retreat. When they are understood, people advance. Avoiding negative feelings keeps a person trapped in the same emotional patterns. Facing them with curiosity transforms them into tools for self-mastery. The feeling itself is not the problem. The story attached to it is. The mind has a habit of dramatizing emotions by attaching identity to them. A person does not say, "I feel anxious." They say, "I am anxious." That subtle shift turns a temporary state into a permanent label. Once an emotion becomes part of identity, behavior follows it automatically. The first step in overcoming negative feelings is separation. You are not your emotions. You experience them. When this distinction becomes clear, emotional control becomes possible. Negative emotions gain strength through repetition. The same thought replayed over and over produces the same emotional response. Over time, that response becomes familiar, and familiarity feels safe even when it is painful. This is why people return to anxiety, self-doubt, and worry without realizing it. It is not because they enjoy suffering, it is because the mind prefers the known over the unknown. Growth requires stepping into emotional uncertainty. The brain resists this because uncertainty threatens its sense of control. Interrupting this cycle requires conscious intervention. The moment a negative feeling arises, attention must shift from the emotion to the thought creating it. Thoughts lose power when questioned. Is this thought true? Is it useful? Is it based on fact or assumption? Most negative thoughts collapse under examination. They survive only when left unchallenged. Once the thought weakens, the emotional charge begins to fade naturally. Replacing negative feelings does not mean pretending everything is fine. It means choosing a higher interpretation. The mind cannot focus on two dominant ideas at once. When attention is deliberately placed on possibility, learning, or growth, the emotional state follows. This is not wishful thinking. It is neurological conditioning. The brain strengthens the pathways it uses most. Whatever emotional state is practiced becomes the default state. Negative feelings also carry momentum. If they are fed, they grow. If they are observed, they dissolve. Observation creates space. In that space, choice appears. Choice is the bridge between emotion and action. Most people act from emotion without ever accessing choice. That is why regret follows reaction. Mastery comes from responding instead of reacting. Response requires awareness. Awareness begins with stillness. As emotional awareness increases, tolerance for negativity decreases. The mind becomes less willing to entertain self-sabotaging thoughts. Emotional intelligence grows. Instead of being dragged by feelings, a person learns to guide them. Emotional storms pass more quickly. Inner stability increases. Confidence is no longer dependent on external validation, but on internal understanding. Negative feelings lose authority when they are no longer feared. Fear feeds them. Acceptance neutralizes them. When emotions are allowed to pass without resistance, they complete their cycle and exit. Suppression traps them. Expression releases them. Mastery lies in neither suppression nor indulgence, but in conscious observation. This shift changes everything. The inner world becomes quieter. Clarity replaces confusion. Emotional resilience develops. Life does not become free of challenges, but challenges stop creating emotional chaos. The mind learns that discomfort is temporary and manageable. Strength grows not from avoiding negative feelings, but from understanding them, reframing them, and using them as feedback for inner alignment and conscious growth. Every result in a person's life begins as a conversation in the mind, long before it shows up in reality. Long before actions are taken, choices are made internally through silent dialogue. This inner conversation runs continuously, shaping perception, influencing emotion, and directing behavior. Most people are unaware of it, yet it determines the quality of their life more than any external factor. What you repeatedly say to yourself becomes the framework through which you experience everything. The mind does not wait for permission to speak. It comments, judges, predicts, and compares automatically. If left unchecked, this internal dialogue often turns negative, not because the mind is broken, but because it has been conditioned by past experiences, social influence, and emotional memory. The problem is not that negative thoughts appear. The problem is when they are accepted as truth. The moment a thought is believed, it shapes emotion. The moment emotion is felt, it drives action. Action repeated becomes habit, and habit eventually becomes identity. Most people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they care about. They criticize, doubt, and diminish themselves without noticing. That internal tone creates emotional tension. The body responds as if under constant threat. Stress builds, confidence erodes. Over time, the mind begins to expect failure or disappointment, not because it is inevitable, but because it has been verbally rehearsed internally thousands of times. The inner conversation acts as a filter. It determines what you notice, what you ignore, and how you interpret events. Two people can receive the same feedback. One hears opportunity, the other hears rejection. The difference is not intelligence or ability, it is internal language. Words repeated internally carry emotional weight. They influence belief systems. Beliefs shape perception, and perception shapes reality. Changing this inner dialogue does not mean silencing the mind, it means directing it. The mind responds to authority. If no conscious direction is given, it defaults to old programming. Conscious direction begins with awareness. The moment you notice the tone of your inner voice, you gain leverage over it. Awareness creates choice. Without awareness, the mind runs old scripts automatically. Replacing destructive inner language requires intentional repetition. A single positive thought does not overpower years of conditioning, but repeated, emotionally charged, constructive thoughts can. The subconscious mind accepts what is repeated with feeling. This is why affirmations work when they are felt, not just spoken. Emotion is the glue that bonds thought to belief. The inner conversation must align with the person you are becoming, not the person you have been. If the inner voice continues to reference past mistakes, limitations, and fears, the future will mirror the past. When the language shifts toward growth, capability, and learning, behavior adjusts naturally. The mind seeks consistency between identity and action. When you identify as disciplined, you act disciplined. When you identify as confident, you behave confidently. Internal language also influences emotional resilience. During challenges, the inner conversation either strengthens or weakens you. One voice says, "This is too much, I can't handle this." Another says, "This is difficult, but I am capable of learning through it." The difference between breakdown and breakthrough often lies in a single internal sentence. That sentence determines whether stress becomes fuel or friction. The mind believes what it hears most often, especially when it hears it in your own voice. This is why external motivation fades, but self-talk endures. External encouragement can inspire temporarily, but internal dialogue sustains momentum. When the inner voice becomes supportive, focused, and intentional, emotional stability increases, anxiety decreases, confidence becomes internal rather than situational. The inner conversation also shapes expectations. Expectations influence how the brain searches for evidence. When you expect failure, the mind scans for confirmation. When you expect growth, the mind notices opportunity. This selective attention reinforces belief systems. Reality appears to confirm whatever the mind is primed to see. Mastery of the inner conversation is mastery of life direction. You cannot consistently act against the voice you trust most. If that voice is fearful, progress feels unsafe. If that voice is empowering, growth feels natural. The shift is subtle but profound. Words become instructions. Thoughts become commands. The internal environment becomes aligned with possibility, clarity, and self-respect, creating a foundation where actions, habits, and outcomes rise naturally from a mind that speaks in a language of purpose, confidence, and deliberate intention. Most people believe change requires a dramatic breakthrough, a surge of motivation, or a sudden shift in circumstances. But real transformation rarely happens that way. It happens through repetition, quiet, disciplined repetition that compounds over time. Intensity feels powerful in the moment, but it fades quickly. Consistency, on the other hand, rewires behavior, stabilizes emotion, and reshapes identity. What you do once may inspire you, but what you do daily defines you. The mind and body adapt to what they experience repeatedly. When effort is sporadic, the nervous system remains uncertain. It never knows what to expect, so it resists change. When action is consistent, the nervous system relaxes. It begins to trust the pattern. This trust reduces internal resistance, making progress feel more natural. Consistency removes friction. It turns effort into routine and routine into momentum. Negative feelings often arise when effort depends on emotion. When motivation is high, action feels easy. When motivation drops, action stops. This creates an emotional roller coaster that reinforces self-doubt. Consistency breaks this cycle. It teaches the mind that action is not dependent on mood. Discipline becomes the stabilizing force. Emotion follows action, not the other way around. Small daily actions send a powerful message to the subconscious mind. They communicate identity. When you show up daily, even for a short period, the mind begins to associate you with reliability and self-respect. Confidence grows quietly through evidence, not hype. Each small commitment kept becomes proof that you can trust yourself. That trust reduces internal conflict and emotional volatility. Consistency also reshapes expectations. The brain starts to anticipate progress. Instead of waiting for motivation, it prepares for action. This anticipation shifts emotional tone. Anxiety decreases because the mind knows what to do. Clarity increases because decisions become simpler. Daily structure removes the emotional burden of constant choice. When something becomes a habit, it no longer requires negotiation. Momentum is created when action is predictable. Predictability builds strength. A person who acts consistently builds emotional resilience because they are no longer shocked by effort. Effort becomes normal. Resistance loses its power when it is faced daily in small doses. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes routine. Intensity often leads to burnout because it demands too much too fast. The nervous system perceives it as a threat. Consistency respects the system's need for adaptation. Gradual improvement allows the mind and body to adjust without fear. Growth feels safe. This safety is essential for lasting change. When change feels safe, the subconscious stops sabotaging progress. Consistency also protects against setbacks. When progress is built on routine rather than emotion, a bad day does not derail everything. Missed motivation does not become missed identity. The system remains intact. One imperfect day does not undo the pattern. This emotional stability is what separates those who sustain growth from those who constantly restart. Daily discipline builds a quiet confidence that does not depend on external validation. You stop needing proof from others because you have proof from yourself. This internal confidence is steady. It does not spike or crash. It is rooted in behavior, not feeling. Over time, the mind stops questioning whether you will show up. It expects you to. Consistency also compounds focus. When attention is applied daily, clarity increases. Goals stop feeling abstract. Progress becomes visible. Small wins accumulate. Each day adds a layer. Each layer strengthens belief. Belief fuels further action. This feedback loop is powerful because it is self-sustaining. The greatest benefit of consistency is identity shift. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to change. You see yourself as someone who shows up. This identity change alters how you respond to challenges. Instead of asking if you can continue, you ask how to adjust. Adaptation replaces avoidance. Growth becomes a process rather than a struggle. This is why consistency outperforms intensity. It does not rely on emotion. It does not demand perfection. It builds strength through repetition. It trains the mind to expect progress. It creates emotional stability through structure. It turns discipline into freedom, effort into habit, and small daily actions into a powerful force that reshapes character, confidence, and direction over time.